So there's three parts to the PMP exam, in my opinion. First part is processes in a big table. You just have to learn the table. The second part is standardized stuff. You look at those questions and you will recognize them. Different people will recognize. Check. And then 1/3 of them are tricky. Okay? Just plain tricky. And for most people, this is what has to happen for you to pass. You have to learn to recognize the tricky ones and figure them out and do them. Okay? And rather cynically, I'd say, if you're in this room right now and there were no tricky questions on the exam, you could pass it right now without, okay? The pass mark is also rather low. Now, this one's okay, right? Yeah, okay. So the pass mark is rather low. And PMI is a little bit disingenuous in this, in that they say the pass mark is 80% or something. And some percentage of the questions are test questions, right? 25. And those questions are, they're trying them out. So a lot of the questions you're answering are going to be test questions, right? So you subtract the test questions and okay. My best guess is the pass mark is around 70, right? So if you get a C in your class at BU, you can pass the PMP, right? So when you take the test, the first thing that part of the test is how the questions work. You have 15 minutes, and there's not a very difficult test where you do it, right? It takes you about 5 minutes to do that. And because you can save questions for later marking and those kinds of things, right? So, but it's very easy, it's very quick. So that gives you 10 minutes with nothing to do. This is where you can really make a difference. Because what they give you is 2 blank sheets of paper, a pencil, and a calculator, right? So during that 10 minutes, write down all of the critical information, right? So what I happened to write down at that point was the table, the inputs, the outputs, the processes, the process groups go this way, the knowledge areas go down, and the processes go in the boxes, and the key inputs and outputs. It's not as bad as it sounds, because many of the output from one process is the input, et cetera, et cetera. But I wrote down that table. So when those input-output processing questions came up, I looked at the table, I said, yep, I'm in this process, this document, what do they want, right? So that's a real useful thing to do. Now, again, this is mine, and that left me with 1/3 of the questions that I couldn't do, which are the tricky ones, okay? And what's interesting about this is this guy knows how to decode those questions, right? So Vijay looks at a question, he goes, oh, this is about this and this and this and this, and therefore they want to know this, and there's the answer. And I'm going, really? I have no clue, right? So the book that we recommend on that is the Rita Mulcahy book, right? But don't start with that book. This is a mistake that I made that I pass on to people, okay? I started with the Rita book and worked with it for about a week. It took a couple of tests and failed miserably and was very depressed, okay? And I found a book that was called 200 PMP Questions, Why the Right Answers Are Right and Why the Wrong Answers Are Wrong, right? And it was organized by knowledge area, and it was the basic questions, okay? And I studied that book for 2 or 3 days, and that was the ticket. That got me confident that I could do the basic stuff, right? And then I said, okay, now I'm ready to go back to the Rita book, and what Rita teaches you is how to decode the sneaky questions, right? And it took me, I took 2 weeks off, literally, to do this. You can do it over a longer period of time. If you got a job, it's going to take you longer. But I got up every morning, practiced drawing the table. Oh, wrong again, and learned it. And it took me about a week to get the table down so I could do it quickly, right? And so that's kind of the process that I went through. It took me about 2 weeks of, let's say, solid mornings because you can't study this stuff for longer than a couple of hours. It drives you crazy, right? And the book that taught me the basics, and then I was able to go to Reader. Okay. So somewhere, and then of course the ethics questions, which are really hard. My friend Jim Cormier, who's no longer with us, used to say, the answer to all of the ethics questions is the one you would never do in practice.
Eventually take the high road.
Yeah, take the high road, always, right? The one okay. So that's kind of my introduction. Vijay's going to go through some of the basic stuff, but I thought I'd pause for questions, if anybody has any questions. Yep. I can get the reference for you. Are we sending emails to people?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
We'll send at 5 o'clock.
We'll send out that email, right. It's actually an obsolete book, but it's for the purposes that we're talking about, it still works.
And what about, you didn't mention the PMP. Did you read that?
I tried. Right. Yeah. I preface this by saying this is my opinion, and you have to put it in the hopper with everybody else's. But I found it almost impossible to read the PMBOK and take the questions. Okay. What I could do, and I've since done, is you can look at a PMBOK paragraph and decide how to write a tricky question from it. But that's, yeah, you have to read it, but frankly, you have the knowledge. If you're sitting in this room, and it's always true, right? Because you've taken the course, you've done the 4,500 hours, right? You know all about projects. From this point on, it's just about taking the exam, right? There's nothing high-level theoretical here, or it's good for your soul or anything else, right? It's just pass the damn test, right? So from that perspective, I'm not sure how helpful the PMBOK is to be,
And Roger tells about how you don't tell anyone you know.
Right. Don't tell anybody you're taking the test. I didn't. I came in, you just go in, you take the test.
Added stress.
Right. And then, as I said, it's a 4-hour test, right? And it's a marathon. And after 2.5 hours, I was exhausted. And I went, I can't do this. And then I thought, wait a minute. Take a minute. Relax. It's only another hour. You can do this, right? And I had a piece of luck. And those of you who've been in my class will understand this. The next question was an earned value question. I went, yes! I can do this. So, you have to be ready. It's a real marathon, okay? And then the screen goes blank, and there is the longest minute of your life where they count the score. And I was thinking, I will never do this again. Right? And fortunately, I passed. And my score is not great, but I don't care. Nobody has asked me my score, right? And then I went in and told people. I did not tell anybody.
All right. Thank you, Roger. All right. So again, my focus is you saw how we skipped the question on PMBOK. But unfortunately, you can't avoid the PMBOK. You have to read it. You're required to read it. So what we have and what I have uncovered is a magical way to do the PMBOK, but in a fun manner. All right, so what was it, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I told Roger, I want to make PMBOK fun. So he started giving me dirty looks. Our next edition of the book, we wrote a book where the first edition didn't have this chapter on making PMBOK fun. Of course, that's not the title. We called it Picnic Project, right? That sounds more fun than PMBOK, right? But what we did is, I think I've been teaching PMBOK, PMP prep for, I think Tanya is here. When did you, 1998?
No, 2001.
2001. So, I've been teaching this thing forever. So I have several hundred students who have graduated. And eventually, I've just mastered the art of trying to teach PMP prep in a very efficient way. And she's one of the, the smart people. She, at a time when PMP was not popular, you started studying project management and focusing on project management for a career. So So that's all right. So let's take a look at how we can make PMBOK fun. Yeah, I'm going to be giving you a URL of the previous session, so I'm going to avoid too much overlap between the session we had yesterday and focus on the some of the other processes that you need to know. So let's focus on some of the processes that we didn't talk about, and just to give you, okay, let me make this larger. And then I'll tell you how to attack all the processes, all right? So here we go. All right, there we go. All right, so in the second edition of the book, we decided to focus on PMP templates. And the case study we used is a graduation picnic party. And you can imagine it's a celebration for you when you pass the exam, all right? So it's a party you're planning when you pass the exam. So that's what it was. In our case, we had a charter. We had, the dean giving us $5,000 to celebrate upon graduation. We have a couple of students here. And you have access to a workbook where you have several templates and you try to fill it out. All right, so you fill this out. Like I said, if you want to buy the book, the link is there, and the book gives you some more details. All right, so the project overview statement you use for your 47 PMP processes which are there in the PMBOK guide is very simple. The project overview statement is, in one sentence, organize a graduation party on the 15th of May within a budget of $5,000. All right, so that with that case study, you move on to understanding various templates. All right, so what we did in the previous session is we did the charter. You all saw a sample charter. What you have to do is practice entering a few, for the case study you have in mind, practice entering a few of these statements. All right, and that'll give you some level of comfort. Now, if you watch my previous session, you would have seen that there is a reference to a business case. Well, the business case provides you some of the data you see here. The business case provides you the justification for the project, and that's what a business case does. Why does senior management, why does the sponsor want the project? And that comes from the business case. So now you will start seeing the tie, and I'm going to show you a spreadsheet, by the way, which ties all of this together. So the spreadsheet has the details. All right, so you have the input, which is the project justification, which is coming from the business case. You have high-level requirements, some of which is coming from the business case. You enter some of the other numbers you have, a budget of $5,000, the assigned project manager, you write the name down. Now remember, the charter is created by senior management, not the project manager. So you write the name of the assigned project manager and you're done with the charter. You will see, if you look at the various test databases, you will see a couple of questions on charter. Who creates the charter? What does the charter do? It assigns the, go ahead. It assigns the project manager, and Roger will tell the.
Okay, this is what just happened. Vijay said the project manager doesn't write the charter, right? That's a key piece of information, which he has completely internalized, right? That's the sneaky thing that you have to figure out, right? So when you read the PMBOK and it says the project, the senior somebody or other delivers the charter, you just read it and you go, oh, yeah, fine, right, okay. But that's a key piece of information. And the sneaky question is who, disguises who wrote the charter, right? So when I say that's the kind of thing that Vijay recognizes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And that's why you need the test questions and the books to help you find those little answers.
Because what might have happened is at your workplace, if there was a charter, the project manager was writing it. And, that's probably not the right process. Having said that, there's nothing wrong if you do not see a charter in the organization that you write it. All right, so that's what happens. All right, so I'm going to, if you attended the previous session, we did the identify stakeholders, we did ranking the stakeholders. So we completed a whole bunch of these templates. And by the way, you can download all of those templates. The hyperlink in the presentation will give it to you. All right, so then we said, all right, so now the planning process starts, and we stopped at the requirements. So we have the requirements, and the next thing you do is create a scope statement. Again, what you have to do is, for the party project, write the scope statement down. Spend some time, write it down, and then try to derive the connection between the scope statement and what is required to do the scope statement. Now, the charter is the one that has the project objective. So you can see that there is a method in the inputs, outputs, tools, and techniques. It appears boring. It appears meaningless. Why are they showing us all those inputs? Well, you know, I explained why there was a relationship between the business case and the charter. Now we are seeing the relationship between the charter and the scope statement. And as you transfer that information physically for your PMP prep study, you're now transferring the project objective from the charter. And now you're understanding the relationship. Now the question is, who's writing the scope statement? It is not senior management, but it is the, project manager. All right. And then as you try to complete these a few more details, you'll realize that you have to add some more technical requirements which are not there in the charter. And then you have to ask yourself, okay, you know, where is this coming from? Anyway, so let's move on to the next one. The scope statement is a formal document. You show it, get it signed by the sponsor, by the stakeholder, and you move on to the next template. All right, so you don't have to know too many techniques for decomposition. You know, if you took our classes, we mentioned the rule of 40. If any of these are more than 40 hours, you break them down into two. You know, or we teach a rule of 1 or 2 weeks, which means if anything is more than 2 weeks, you break it down so that it becomes a smaller chunk. All right, but you need to know project work breakdown structure pretty well. I always kid with my students, if you see, you know, you're looking at a very difficult scenario-based question in the exam and you don't know what the right answer is. If you see WBS in there, just close your eyes and circle it. But WBS is going to be the right answer for a whole bunch of things because it's the best way to identify risk, best way to communicate, you know, to identify costs and all of that stuff. All right. For your party project, eventually you're doing the milestone. You all know milestones. And now that you have the milestones, what you're really going to do is identify activities. All right. So for the party project, your activities would be like Roger said. Roger said allocate 1 week to study. I would have the following activities. Go to Amazon.com, buy the books he's talking about. We mentioned that Rita Mulcahy is the best book. Like I was saying in the previous presentation yesterday on this topic, if you think the Rita book is expensive, $65, don't worry about it. You can sell it after you pass the exam for $55. Just click the submit button back on Amazon. There is another button in there that says buy, and below that is sell. Click sell and put your Rita book back there. You know, you'll get your money back. And if you, and I know Roger didn't touch his PMBOK book, so he can sell that PMBOK book brand new without any scratches or dents or anything. At least the Rita book was well worked through, right? All right, so the step 1 in the activity is buy the books. Step 2 is Roger likes to use, what did you say, 2 weeks? 2 weeks, right? And I use the rule of 100. 100 hours to study for the PMP. So rule of 100. All right, so after you've taken a foundational course in project management, which is for us it's 632, AD 642, and you might have taken 643, 44. At any other college or at your workplace, you might have taken you know, a 2-week course that might provide the foundational knowledge, but not sufficient. But anyway, rule of 100 is good enough for our students who have foundational knowledge. And which means you allocate 100 hours, create your spreadsheet, and identify, you know, how you want to study by knowledge area or by process groups. And you'll see our recommendation in the previous 1-hour webinar. You have to watch that. All right, so you've identified all the activity lists for your party project, then it's studying, then it's taking the exam, passing the exam, setting up something with Parametric, you've completed all your activities. That's a nice way. And then the celebration, the big one. So you have that as your milestone anyway. You try to understand this template because this is all part of PMBOK, and I'm going to show you where this all fits in with the PMBOK guide in a minute. All right, so you do this stuff. You identify the deliverables by your team. Most of this you're doing yourself. Only the party and celebration, you're doing it with your family, with your friends. So this one is an easy one to do. The quantity of resources, it's going to be pretty straightforward. It's only you studying, and eventually the party, right? All right, so if you do not know any tool, if you don't have Microsoft Project, you probably want to download a really good tool, Project Libre. Anyone heard of that? Projectlibre. So it's the #1 project scheduling tool in the world right now. It beats Microsoft Project hands down in many ways. So it's an open source tool, free for the Mac, works on the Mac, works on the Windows. Yep.
Can you spell the second word again?
Yeah, Libre, yeah. Project Libre, all right? And the nice thing with Project Libre is you have a work breakdown structure diagram, which the tree structure, which you don't have with Microsoft Project. You have the outline view, right? Here you have the view. So I'll recommend download that, put your project plan in there for studying and passing the exam, create dependencies, a lot of it which will be probably finished to start, unfortunately. But as you're doing all of that stuff, once again, you're understanding some of the key processes. All right, so I'll continue moving on. Identify risks. Complete this template, which is your risk register. So now you understand what are risks. Don't forget, we require you to identify good risks as well. Just don't focus on risks that are a threat. Focus on good risks as well. Eventually, you will be mitigating these risks, and you'll understand risk mitigation. For example, you have high, medium. High is red, which is high impact and high probability. That's in the red zone. You have high, medium impact, medium probability in the orange, and then you have the acceptable risks, I guess, in the green. Now, how do you plan to mitigate these risks? And some of you, if you have studied already risk, you probably know you can prevent a risk, you can mitigate a risk, you can accept a risk, you can transfer a risk. So make sure you understand all of these risks. And for good risks, certainly you want to enhance, you want to optimize. All right, so moving further, you have to study quality management. And ask yourself, okay, I want to pass the exam the very first time. All right, I want to pass the exam the very first time. That's quality management. What is your quality plan? What is your quality plan to pass the exam the very first time? So try to complete the template from that perspective. What do you consider as a key metric? Is it the quality of effort? Is it communication? What do you really regard as quality? Then go ahead and measure your quality. So again, this particular template, if you fill this out in the PowerPoint slide, that'll give you a chance. And as you're studying, control your quality. Look at the metric you identified and see how well you are doing against the metric. But at least now you understand, the PMP prep and these particular templates. HR is straightforward. It's one of the simplest templates you have, role, responsibility, staff, training, review, core team. Communication management plan. Again, a lot of us know what this is. So what is the communication? What is the message? Really, what is it about? Who is invited? How are you communicating? When and how frequently you do that, and who is sending it? Cost estimation, you have to know parametric estimation. So you have examples of that in the next slide. But the first one is analogous estimation. You have to know what it is. So try to understand this slide. Try to understand parametric estimation. You have to understand parametric estimation is based on historical data. So if you have any historical data, you can come up with parametric estimation. And then you have the 3-point method, which you will probably see in many exam databases. All right, so the 3-point method. So you have top-down study method, top-down methods for estimation. Make sure you understand that. WBS, work breakdown structure, bottom-up detailed estimating method. Now you can see if it's a bottom-up detailed method, you are bringing in expenses like material. Let's say food containers, taxi, food. All of that is coming into your PMP preparation in a little bit more detail than whatever budget you had. All right, so we are done with a couple of these. I'm going to stop at this stage because execution has several more. So now I want to show you, you have the rest of the slides. You can walk through the execution phase, monitor, control, and closing. But now what I want to do is share with you the complete PMBOK in one spreadsheet. All right, so just give me a minute, and I will pull that up. And so let us see. It should be open here. Here it is, life cycle. So once again, you'll get access to this. So this is how you want to study next. I've gone through the party project. I've gone through the PMP prep project for you. So you're going to go through the initiation phase. You're going to go through the planning, execution, monitor and control, and closing. So I'm going to walk you through the same templates, but now I'm going to show you inputs, outputs, tools, and techniques. All right, so the very first knowledge area, and let me make this larger because some of you, yeah.
What's the overview? Show the overview.
Overview is just telling about the spreadsheet. Yeah. Let me just go ahead. All right, so the spreadsheet is showing people what it is about. Let me go up. The phrases, two processes, planning, and this. All right, this is a good one. Thank you, Roger. This one takes the planning processes and puts them down like a network diagram. This is very helpful because planning is the biggest and most complex group. If you understand this, it's great. And the question we get frequently is there any dependency between the various processes? And so I said, you know what, let me try to draw this diagram, and I did. And I found it's not too bad. I created one called, let me just zoom this so you can see this better. And I found that that's too much bigger. All right, so let me go back. I put all the plan, and put them together, and you can see them here. Plan schedule management, plan quality management, plan HR, plan communication, plan risk, plan procurement, plan stakeholder, plan cost management. And I said, wow, it's that easy, and they're all the same. They're all birds of the same feather. They have the same thing. They have the same function. They have the same inputs. They have the same tools and techniques. They have the same outputs. You study one, you have studied all of them. And you can see with one stroke, you have studied all the key planning processes. All right, so that's all coming from planning. All right, and if you go a little bit above, you'll see that I have scope management, collect requirements, define scope. And then you have define activities, you have sequence the activities, you can do estimate activity resources at the same time as you do estimate activity durations. All right, and once you have done both, once you have estimated the activity resources and you have estimated the activity durations, you're ready to have your schedule. And you can do your schedule in, like I said, Microsoft Project or Project Libre. And next thing you do after you have your schedule is, refine your estimates, come up with your project budget, do a risk analysis, identify the risks, quantify them, and you can plan your risk responses. All right, so with this, we have knocked off almost all the planning processes. We have knocked them all out. All right, so let's go to the planning phase. Well, let me go to initiation because that's what I started with, and I'll make this a little bit larger. So if you remember, I said that when you're creating your project charter, the very first template in the PowerPoint slides, you have to ask yourself, where do you get some of the information in the charter? And the input for that is the business case. All right. So the business case defined why you really should be doing it. Why should you be doing the PMP? What's the purpose of the PMP? Why should we be having a party? What's the purpose of that? So you have an input, and then if you studied in your previous course, you probably know that we have expert judgment, we have discussions, that's your tool and technique, and now you have a charter. So I've tied in this particular spreadsheet for all the entire PMBOK. I've tied the tools and techniques and inputs. Now, like Roger said yesterday, Roger said, don't forget to point out that the output from the previous project, in this case Project Charter, becomes the input to the next process. So let's look at that. Let's see if what we said is true. So here it is. If you look at this particular cell C5, you can see that Project Charter is an input for the next process, and the next process is identifying stakeholders. So if I just go a little bit up, you will see that. All right, so you have identify stakeholders. All right, so you have that as an input, and then you have tools and techniques. The previous live recording will show you how we did all the tools and techniques, and what comes out of it is a stakeholder register. How did you come up with a stakeholder register? You had expert judgment, you had discussions with your team, you had discussions with other people, subject matter experts, and you came up with a stakeholder register. So now we have, we are ready to move to the planning phase. I'm not going to do all of this. I'll just show this to you so that you have some idea. All right, so in the planning phase, this is the biggest one. And what we have here is the integration phase. And the integration phase, the key output is project management plan. All right, so you can see, always look at the output first. Don't look at the, look at the output. Why? Because you would have completed that in your template. If you looked at the PowerPoint slide, you would have completed the output. Now that you know what your goal is, go in and see what the inputs are. All right, so you're trying to create, you're trying to create a project management plan. What would be a good input? Of course, the charter would be a good input. And you'll say, even without memorization, all right, you will say, of course, the charter, because I just did the charter a few minutes ago when I was completing Professor Kanabar's templates there for the PMP prep or the picnic project. All right, so the charter makes a great input. So you understand one input, understand one tool or technique, whatever makes you comfortable, expert judgment, facilitation, and then what really comes out of it is the project management plan. All right, so with this, if you look at the others, you have project management plan being an input for scope management. You have, you're doing a charter, you're coming up with a scope statement. Again, the charter is an input. You're creating a work breakdown structure. The scope statement is an input. All right, so if you look at this, all of these input, outputs, tools, and techniques suddenly make sense. All right, I don't have to go through all of them, but if you see there's a pattern for each of the inputs, there's a pattern for tools and techniques, and there's a pattern for the outputs. So what I've done really is moved the inputs, outputs, tools, and techniques by knowledge areas and moved them into process groups. So I flipped them around. All right, so when you're studying the Rita book, you're studying the same thing, but you're not studying them by initiation, planning, execution, monitor, and control. You're studying them in these books. Most of the books, including the PMBOK guide, is showing you the same information, but it's showing it by knowledge area. So what you really want to do is study that, but keep this in mind. So to wrap up, the first thing you'll be doing is trying to complete the PowerPoint slides, complete a sample case study, so you're now comfortable with all the key outputs. Once you have done that, take a look at the spreadsheet, see what the inputs are, and see if there is a dependency. The output of one becomes the input of the other. You have some idea. That's pretty good. Then you move on, dive into a book like Rita Mulcahy's book, or or the PMBOK guide or whatever, and dig in deeper and start taking the PMP prep questions. All right, 100 hours. It'll take 100 hours if you, like a lot of you, have some foundational knowledge. After 100 hours, you can take a stab at this. Once again, we do have probably one of the cheapest PMP prep programs in the country. If you prefer a 3-day boot camp, you saw the information outside. Like I said, it's sold out through December. BU students get a discount, additional discount, 20% or something. I don't know, 10% discount or something. And but either way, it's still a really good program. 3 days, we lock you up in a room, then we take you across to Parametric Center across the street, and there you go. It's a boot camp. So you go across 3 days, at the end of which I start seeing letters flying, emails flying around. I passed, number 1. Then we keep track. Number 2, I passed. Number 3, I passed. And of course, my office is at the BU Bridge, and I'm keeping an eye there. So as I'm seeing people go from 1010 Avenue to mine is at 808 Commonwealth Avenue, are any of these my PMP students? Anyway, we have Dave Shirley, outstanding professor. He has 100% passing rate. He has been teaching for a long time. I facilitate the process. One thing unique we do is we give you a 6-week run-up towards that. Okay, so what do? We also, for students who, feel very confident to study, like Roger, I can do it myself. If you really want to do that, just send an email, and we will put you in a study group where you study on your own, all right, with a group of people. I facilitate that 6 times. So I 6 Sundays, 12 to 1, we do a sanity check and see how you have moved along: initiation, planning, execution, monitor, control, and closing. And that is a really good warm-up act before you decide to study on your own. All right, so that's a free thing if you're interested. But like I said, you may want to consider the 3-day boot camp. All right, we'll take any questions, but this is the end of the formal presentation and the end of the PMIP conference. Thank you all for coming. We really enjoyed this. It was, hope to see some of you again next year. I'd like to get my co-chair to come here, Roger. And Roger has been, like I said in the morning session, an outstanding colleague here for the past 10 years. We have been doing this together. And we are doing it, as you know, not for any money. I don't think they've got money over the past 10 years, right? So we are doing this just because we want to encourage all these interaction. And why else are we doing this, Any reason?
Because you keep telling me to.
Yeah, we do it because it's a nice opportunity to get practitioners together, former students, alumni, and build a community and further the cause of project management. All right, so thank you very much.